Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. This week we're back with some wonderful new guests. We have Dr. Garcha.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
And we have Shamsher Singh from the Sikh Research Institute, who I believe are doing a SIDAC Canada at the moment.
Yes, a leadership retreat program for Sikh youngsters.
Fantastic. And this time of year we also see there's lots of Sikh camps going around all around the UK. So this is an international program, and really it's a program to look at media in general. So let's start off the show and let's talk about the main headline of the week, really. That seems to be in the news as the #1 item that keeps coming up again and again. Now, we're not here to show any bias. We're not here to talk about one side being better than another side. But at the moment, there's a lot of media associated with the problem between Gaza and Israel. I've got my guests here to review the particular items that come up. We've got some shots, we've got some video that we'll show you as well. But really, the situation is terrible. I have a statistic here from an online magazine called Vox. They're talking about something like 70% of the people that are killed are actually Palestinian civilians. In terms of the actual Israeli conflict, since it began, there's been 1,170 people that have been killed, and out of that, 815 Palestinians, and out of that, 232 of them unacceptable in any case of anyone dying, but happen to be children. So I wanted to ask Dr. Garcha, I mean, this is, we were talking about this just before the show started, and we kind of got away. We were talking about the fact that what will needs to exist to come up with a solution, because obviously this is an area of conflict, a conflict zone as it's described since 1948. It's taking a long time to get to a resolution. It's taking a lot of time to get two people to say we need to stop throwing bombs at each other.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And if you look at the whole history of it, what it shows is that where there isn't a political dialogue, where there isn't political discussion, what happens? The situation gradually ferments and gets worse and worse until there is an outbreak, as there is here, of hostilities. And then what you get, as you've mentioned, is the sad and tragic loss of civilians, and especially children. Now, what the real truth is very difficult to be sure of, but where you get that number of civilian casualties, it really does need to be appreciated by everybody around the world, and those are especially those leaders who have political sway, and that happens to be in Europe and in America, North America especially. And what you're seeing is, and I think we're going to have the news item later, is when the Malaysian aircraft crashed into Ukraine, there was a lot of political, what you might call, dialogue, and rightly so, because again it was a tragedy, but you had European leaders, you had North American leaders obviously going and saying, and the UN as well, being involved and say, look, what has happened? This is an innocent loss of life done where they have got nothing to do with it, and this has happened. Why are those questions not being answered? Now, a similar thing is also happening here. We know what's going on, but there doesn't appear to be the degree of urgency and the degree of leadership from political leaders to carry on. Now, since basically, I think, is it 1973, 72, the Sadat and Begin thing, nothing has really moved significantly forward.
It seems that Egyptians seem to be the ones that they kind of asked to get involved to help kind of broker deals.
They do, but Egypt in itself is in a weak position. If you look at what's happened there, they've just had elections, and do they have any well-recognized military leader with sway, or, well, not just a military leader, but a political leader, with having political weight or political muscle to actually, shall we say, maneuver some kind of discussion taking place? So really, I think it's again, the Europeans, the Americans, who need to get together and say, look, these are the players that we can have influence with. We really move it forward and use the Security Council and the UN to say, look, we must pass a Security Council resolution. Because if you pass something like that, it may well have a sway, because if you look at even going to 1967 and borders and the resolutions that have been passed, there at least has been a degree of consensus in terms of working at particular outcomes. At the moment, there isn't a solution, or doesn't appear to be dialogue, because there aren't sort of aspirations which have been fully spelled out.
Maybe they don't like that
Well,
organisation,
the only
Hamas.
aspirations that are being spelled out are the militaristic ones. You know, we're getting missiles thrown over, again, wrong, absolutely. And the others are saying, well, we are being barricaded, or we are one massive refugee camp because our neighbour, it happens to be Israel. Now, how true that is, they're saying they have control over who comes in, goes out, or what happens and what doesn't happen. Again, because it's such a large area, minute in terms of Earth, but in terms of the number of population, it's difficult to control in a way by no matter which country who may wish to do that, but still they feel in a way, whether it's right or wrong, a degree of subjugation. And when that happens, those particular people who may well have aspirations which are political as well as military, they will actually carry them out.
Do you think it's, Shamsher, do you think this is a war of kind of social media propaganda as well? Because, I mean, you know, those that use Facebook or Twitter or YouTube and those kind of outlets, is the truth really in the media that's actually communicated? I'll give an example. Jon Snow recorded something recently where he kind of really spoke about how terrible it was. There was an anchor that went down in tears. We see, sadly, you know, anyone dying, as I said before, whether it be a child or an adult, you know, the amount of footage that's out there. We see another set of footage where the Israelis are lining up outside these kind of holes that have been dug, these kind of underground tunnels. So, you know, what's the truth in terms of what we should believe and how it's being communicated?
I think the proliferation of social media has definitely provided such a new and interesting angle, and it connects us with people that are living there, your average.
You can't make this stuff
person.
up though, can you? What's in your camera? When you pick up the phone and you make a camera recording of it and you send it across, that's what's actually happening.
You can, we can be very selective about what you show, but
That's true,
you know, you definitely, there has to be something that takes place for you to then put down social media, and I think it makes everybody into almost this concept of citizen journalism, and you know, by the minute updates, what's happening. You can then compare and contrast in the mainstream news media to what people are putting on social media. It really provides such an interesting perspective. I remember seeing something, article about Israeli teenagers sending tweets about how they wish all the Arabs are killed and all their children are killed, and these are just, you know, really young kids. And then you see civilians in Gaza sending pictures. I saw this one picture of the moment a bomb's about to drop, and you just see a street, you see people in their cars, you see children, and you just see this bomb just captured, you know, in a still image. So it's quite horrifying as well.
And isn't it horrifying also? I mean, regardless of, you know, we've spoken about the fact that, you know, they're throwing bombs over, and then in retaliation, it seems that, you know, because it's such a high population of younger people in the Gaza Strip, you know, we've seen a video of people that are actually having rallies in the Israeli side who are saying, oh, there's no more children, there's no more school, and they're kind of like, they're feeling kind of joyous about that. They're feeling joyous about a death. There has to be something wrong with that, even if it's just a snippet of somebody doing it for 5 seconds or somebody doing it for 10 seconds. The very thought of actually celebrating the death of somebody has to be seen as being very perverse, isn't it?
I think it's part of a larger problem of dehumanization of the people of Gaza as well, especially in the American media. If you watch Fox, I suggest you don't, but if you do, you'll see that.
That's your view?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, that's my personal view, but everybody, the individuals, the civilians in Gaza, they very rarely talk about civilians there, and Hamas is always a terrorist organization when it's the democratically elected
There was an article in The
government.
Guardian talking about the fact that there was a report that was issued about how certain, you know, parts of the Israeli media and press should talk about, or how politicians should talk about what's actually happening to them, to actually kind of, you know, make sure that that is underpinned, that there is a terrorist organization, inverted commas, in their view that they're dealing with, rather than actually talking about doing a negotiation.
Sure, but I think what you then have to take it back to is the legacy that it will leave. And Shamsher is quite right, because if you get children doing that, and we know that early development in childhood is very important in terms of your feelings, whatever, and what kind of belief you're going to have. And if your belief at an early age is that you are absolutely me forever and a day, therefore you're going to grow up with that. what you're going to be looking at is basically not looking at human values. That is a dehumanization kind of thing, and then life and dignity. And although on both sides there are what they say are people of faith, what they're actually not showing is that faith through. So, and what is also quite intriguing in a way is that where I was saying there was a relative lack of sort of political heavyweights coming in, there is also a relative lack of spiritual heavyweights.
It's a very good point, actually.
So if you look at on both sides, they're recognizing...
Where are the imams? Where are the rabbis coming forward to get together to talk about the fact that this is a bad thing?
But that's what I'm saying, because you need all of that. And I think that if you go back to Sikh ideology, the Gurus have, and especially the 10th Master, has actually quite put it together there in looking at Zafarnama and then dealings with Badr Shah after Aurangzeb and whatever. The political situation, he's always after a political thing based on good and spiritual and truthful values. And he says when there is tyranny, when there is subjugation, when there is atrocities, you have to stand up and talk to the right. Now, here we also have to be very careful, because you are quite right in terms of looking at media. We need to be absolutely sure, is the media reporting the truth? Now, images can sometimes tell a picture and a story, but it actually also can be a very deviated story. But
what I would say, the truth is, on either side, there's a death.
Yeah.
Right? And the truth to that family is the fact that they've lost somebody.
And that's
right? That's the ripple effect that they live with.
At the end of the day, if you look at those, vast majority of those families on either side, they want to live in peace. They want to bring up their children peacefully. They also want to have, for them to have a good education, a good life, and, you know, put forward in a way, well, take things forward in a way, having a peaceful, happy life, which is what I think we all want to enjoy. And that is why the charters of the UN and the charters of particular countries are basically there. The state.
Well, hopefully they can turn those words into reality. Let's move on to the next part of the show, where we do cover the news from around the world. And I really appreciate your feedback on that. I think really good suggestions on what we can do about Gaza. We hear in the news, and I think the Commonwealth Games is going on at the moment in Scotland, and there is a case that someone's been reported from a West African area with Ebola, right? Do you think the press is sensationalizing a little bit too much about the fact that 600 deaths or something or more over in the West African region, and the fact that it could spread, and there isn't necessarily a cure for that? I mean, the medical expert here, Dr. Garcha.
I'm a medical expert. I have some knowledge.
You need to know about all these things, don't you? How do you retain all that knowledge?
I think that to an extent we need to be aware, but I think that the problem is in West Africa, isn't it? And we need to say, are there those people who may well travel? And I think what you're looking at is that those airports and whatever, where people are coming from there, they are being made more aware. GPs and other people in hospitals are being made aware to look out for those kind of things. And if you look at it, similar with the SARS and looking with the other sort of problems that we've had before, is that the country is sort of well prepared as to trying dealing with them. The problem is the information lag. And if you look about it in terms of the actual threat, I think that the actual threat is very low. And when you talk about serious illnesses, and we were talking earlier, that a serious illness like meningitis or septicemia or one of those illnesses, even a pneumonia, can kill, people can die within sort of 3 to 6 hours.
Yeah, so it's a question of catching it early enough.
Catching it early enough, and also the preventative measures. And if you look at what you might call here, that the threat in this country is more of TB, and especially in London. Yeah. And if you look at London, it's one of the hotspots of tuberculosis.
Is that because there's a lot of people coming in on planes? And
well, it is that, but also it appears to be that TB is a very interesting disease, that there is reactivation of it, and it tends to be highest in those people from the Indian subcontinent. Right. So approximately 70% of cases in Ealing and Hounslow boroughs appear to be in those people from the Indian subcontinent. Right. So yes, I know that the threat is there, but I think the threat is not as high as we make out. I think we are aware about it, and if cases do come, the other thing is that the spread is not airborne, it is more by body fluid.
Sure.
So it's not as dangerous as what you may call SARS was previously.
Okay, interesting. So another news item that came through was the fact that international observers have now reached the crash site of the MH70 Malaysian disaster, and we were just talking about that earlier on, about the fact that, you know, the different political situation there. Now, the Dutch Prime Minister has said words like the fact that, you know, it is an immediate cessation of between what's going on over there that's actually led to the fact that people can actually go over and look at it. And he said it's actually, it's an almost unbearable, is the word that he's used, situation, because obviously the number of people that died, quite a large number of them were from Dutch origin. So, you know, what's your view of the fact that, do you think that people, they've also used this phrase that the evidence may have been tampered on an industrial scale? I'm not sure what that actually means. What's your view of that?
I think the situation is definitely a very tricky one, with the instability in Ukraine and Russia's involvement and other political motivating factors. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this whole situation plays out, especially with this allegation of evidence tampering. We'll see what the flight data recorder and those types of devices show up. Obviously, I don't really want to comment because it's still an ongoing investigation and there's a lot of political and military tensions in that place. But what's really interesting is how the commentary surrounding this plane crash, and it's a tragic loss of life, but it kind of pales into situations of what's happening in Palestine. It's almost interesting to see how our intentions being diverted and how one tragedy is produced and presented as being much more severe and unbearable than a tremendous loss of life over a period of 40 years.
I wonder if it's a situation where, you know, you find that because obviously the airline's got lots of different people from different nationalities involved, it's global, suddenly becomes a global issue, like 9/11, whereas, you know, even, like I said before, sadly death on either side is terrible, but because it affects Palestinians and Israelis, it's just down to two lots, two groups, rather than a lot of people. Therefore, a lot of people are interested, and therefore the press kind of play on that.
Yeah, definitely they do. And the thing is, the press is very selective about the information it presents. There was a very similar case to what's happened now with the American government when they shot down a civilian passenger jet with a missile in a mistake. They thought it was a military aircraft, and they've never apologized for it, and there's never been an investigation into it. And I'm really shocked to see that similarity isn't being drawn. Maybe it's perhaps on one side it's a Western government, on the other side it's a former Soviet bloc government. So I think, you know, it's these parallels.
Yeah, and then sometimes they have different aspects to them as well, don't they?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the final part of the program. Time's just rushing by. You know, lots of things to talk about. I wanted to talk about Sikhi camps. I mentioned it before. There's lots of Sikhi camps in Gurdwaras going on at the moment. I happen to be one at the Sikh Connections one in Ealing Gurdwara actually just a few days ago, and I think you'll see some screenshots of some of the stuff that the kids, 14 years upwards, there's 14 kids that we'd got together, and we did a media workshop. We did something on producing an e-book, producing an online website, using Twitter to promote a particular personality like Milka Singh, and we got their posters, which hopefully you can see that they've designed. Dr. Garcha, so there is a Sikhi camp coming up in Singh Sabha, I think, in a couple of weeks' time, almost like 11 days or so, isn't it? Do you think these are good things to have? Do you think there should be a Sikhi camp for people that are over the age of 40?
I think there should be. There should be many more of them. I think why we do it with young children is because of the summer holidays and also for them to come together. And I think Sikhi is also about having fun, but nice fun and happy fun. And in the Sikhi camps, what we do realise is a lot of information that we can impart. And a lot of it is using sort of multimedia and so forth that we use. And a lot of the youngsters who come really benefit from it because it's something different to the education that they're following normally. But a lot of the other thing is just children getting together and sort of what you might call chilling out and chatting and whatever. So it is slightly different. It's not formalised that much. It's more informal. And it's a great sense of well-being and achievement for the people who are sort of helping out or being sevadars there, and some of the parents come in and join in. So you see a lot of different people coming in and actually celebrating that and just doing it. And this will be, I think it's about 11th year that Singh Sabha has held it.
There's almost I know you know Harinder Singh from SIKHRI, and when he came over recently, and I think a year or so ago when we met him as well, and they do the SEDAC program, and this time around it happens to be in Canada, and there's a lot of people that you see, like I think even people like Just Rain and other people who have become quite popular in media now, actually were inspired through those leadership type programs. When I look at skills, it's typically like if you're in a job or something, you might get trained up to be good at presentation skills or negotiation skills or leadership skills. And these are kind of like generic life type skills. Even media, you could argue, is a kind of a skill of using the internet properly or whatever it is to communicate your message in whatever field of life you're in. But in one sense, you've got generic skills, then you've got Sikh knowledge, and then you've got the language. And then the great thing about, I was thinking about this today actually, about how great it is about Chinese community. If you talk to a lot of Chinese people, they do actually know Mandarin, they do know their different dialects, and they place language as quite an important aspect. Whereas I think, when I talk to a lot of young people, they might not know how to speak Punjabi, they can understand it. And it just so happens that we've fallen into, I've got it even with my kids as well, that we've fallen into this trap where we will talk to them in Punjabi or English, but the conversation tends to be more in English, but the understanding, if any person from the family is talking to them, would be in Punjabi and English. They're kind of almost like a Punjabi-English type cross, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but being removed from your language sometimes takes you away from your heritage and understanding the true essence, even understanding Gurmukhi, understanding the true essence of what is actually in the word itself,
Yeah, a lot of our cultural memory is preserved in our language, and the way we speak, it comes from our gurus as well, with Tadivana, with Kirtan. So many of our concepts and ideas are preserved within that Gurmukhi and Punjabi language mindscape, and it's really important that we can connect to that and inspire our children to connect to that.
The point I wanted to make was that we almost see there's a set of grouping of skills. You see, you've got generic skills, you've got language skills, and you've got religious, spiritual knowledge, right? Should they really come together in just, a 2-week period or a 1-week, worth of knowledge, or should there not be a continuous program? I'm not being critical to any institution. I'm just saying, not only is it difficult for the Gurdwara to actually manage that, their finances and the building and all the administration, not a simple job to look after Gurdwara, but even also to motivate the people that come there to learn more about Sikhi must be very difficult.
Well, the problem is, it has been the disconnect about passing on our, what you may call, stories.
Right.
And that's because our parents came on a generation, if the first generation, they're working overtime and whatever, the grandparents were not there to pass those stories over. And I think one of the greatest opportunities that we now have, and we all have, is to say, are those grandparent skills being used? Can they use that? Do we get our grandchildren to mix with them regularly enough? And this is one of the programs that we're going to be having.
I think it's a really brilliant idea to get the generations to connect.
That's right.
Yeah.
The Male Girl project that we have there is especially to do that. It's looking at the health and social care agenda. And the social care agenda does include children. Because if you're looking at marriage difficulties, marriage challenges, and you're looking at children being run by either one-parent families or distress, this is where grandchildren grandparents or people who may be in the grandparents kind of age group are able to assist, and where children, where they're causing problems or not causing problems but having problems,
having issues,
things, and where you've got mother and toddler groups, we haven't got enough of them, childcare is difficult. This is where the people who have read a little bit, lots of them, they have lots of skills. What we need to do is to harness that. And one of the ways what we're seeing it in the Gurdwara is to do it through an elderly care project, where they come and celebrate success themselves. They exercise and keep fit, talk about health issues, but also talk about that further agenda of how to keep better relationships between their children as well as their grandchildren. And I think that is something that we really do.
It's a unique way of doing things, absolutely. No, we've only got a few minutes left for the show, right? There's a couple of things I just wanted to go through before we go to the end. The first thing was, I think I've been involved in doing some work on this new solver.org organisation, which is basically to try and put a website together where lots of people from around the world can contribute to talking about some of the issues that we've been talking about today. Maybe suggest that rather than waiting for someone like Egypt to step in and solve problems, that they to actually get in a think tank together, producing research.
Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. I had a look at your website. The concept is sound. I see it's motivated a lot by the Sikh ethos of community and bringing everyone together to solve problems and respecting people's personal experiences, because every individual can bring something to the table.
Bring it, you know, they can, like you were just saying just now about, for example, you know, bringing some of the older people together with the people. And the only thing I was saying about the facilitation part was only just short that if they do have a language difficulty about communicating, or they need an exercise to center around a particular problem, like here's a problem, how do we solve it? And if it's an everyday problem, and then it gets them to talk. This takes us on to the final part of the show, really, is the Sikh Heritage aspect, you know, this week in history. Now, on the 31st of July, literally just within days ago, we stand that over the actual date itself, we've got the date written down, haven't we?
31st of August, 1940.
Okay, we had Udham Singh had come over, he'd waited, I think, he'd travelled 5,000 miles, someone said. He waited 21 years, and then he effectively was there in Caxton Hall. Michael Dyer was the person who was in charge of Punjab at the time during the Jallianwala Bagh situation, where it wasn't Michael Dyer was doing the shooting, but he had kind of authorized the random shooting. My father was there in 1919. He escaped the Jallianwala Bagh situation. And Udham Singh came over to the UK and he shot Michael Dyer at Caxton Hall. And I think this is the 31st of July was when I think he was hung, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the anniversary of the hanging of the assassination.
Yeah, and then, you know, that's within, if you look at it in terms of 1940 we're looking at, aren't we? So, you know, if you look at that in terms of number of years, you know, that's within a lot of people that we know within their generation as well, isn't it? They can probably remember what they were doing, you know, their experiences. And thank you very much for joining us this time round. Until next time, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.